Let us turn our hearts and minds to the presence of the Lord our God. I think it is true to say that the gospel calls us not to analysis, but to synthesis. The synthesis that is knowledge. To know another requires commitment to the other. In the language of classical antiquity, it was said you could never know another until you loved the other. This, in turn, required the simplicity to let go of everything else so that you might love. Then we come to the heart of the mystery. The knowledge that the New Testament speaks of is not so much our knowledge, which in any case is always limited, but is the knowledge by which we are known, and that is our invitation. To so open our heart and minds that we know with the knowledge of God, and the call of the New Testament is a call to union. We must be unified in ourselves in order to find our union with God. Let us adore the ever-living God and render praise unto him. He spread out the heavens and established the earth, and his glory is revealed in the heavens above. And his greatness is manifest throughout the whole earth. He is our God. There is no one else.
This just in. I was glancing at this book I got for Father's Day from Squire Rushnell. When God winks at you, how God speaks directly to you through the power of coincidence. Interesting? Other things, especially for a non-believer in coincidence. But even so, a couple of things just they caught my attention. I was just browsing through it there for a moment. Here's a test to find out whether your mission on earth is finished. If you are alive, it isn't.
Yeah.
That's what I'm like. So God still is working with us. That's an important thing to do today, to find God in all things. Now this one, basically paraphrasing of 1 Corinthians 2:9. No eye has seen, no ear has heard, and no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. I always like that verse. 1 Corinthians chapter 2, the whole chapter is actually pretty good stuff. But no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has imagined what God has prepared for those who love him. And the context of that chapter, Paul's saying, I didn't come to you with persuasive words of wisdom, with discursive reason and discourse and all that sort of thing, that your faith might be based on the demonstration of the Spirit of God. And he goes on in that chapter to say, the wisdom that we have received is not the wisdom of this world, but it is spiritually discerned. When we talk about finding God in all things, it is tempting, and there are many people who yield to the temptation, and all of us do at times, to say, well, yes, let's to find God in all things. Let's to see God in all things. You know, and a lot of times we sort of develop our philosophies, shall we say, of saying, well, you know, whatever happens, you know, God has a purpose. And that's true. I mean, there's a sense in which that's true. But if we actually reflect for just a moment on some of the more critical moments in life, like if someone's just lost a very beloved family member, somehow, usually, having them on the hand and said, well, God had a reason to take them at this time. So it's such a T for X, doesn't it? Kind of thing. And while it may be well true that God has a purpose in all things, and he does, I believe that, to make the assumption that we know what that purpose is most of the time, I think there's fairly flimsy evidence for it, certainly in my own mind, too, oftentimes. So when we talk about finding God in all things, it's a very, very important concept. But it's not finding our idea of God in all things that turns the trick. It's not finding our philosophy or what sets in with our doctrinal belief system so we can plug all things in. Most of life, I find, theology at least, is oftentimes I run into square pegs and round holes. And we can either hold on to our, depending on the analogy the rest of us, our round holes of what we believe, or we can say, change me, Lord. Search my heart. See what things there are that are, as the psalmist said, Psalm 139, that are painful. See if there be any wicked way in me, not because it's some evil, connoting, even necessarily egotistical, but what are the things that are keeping us from seeing God in all things? And of course, one of the immediate things that we stop thinking about that keeps us from seeing God in all things is we look through our eyes. And as we just heard from the look here, when God winks at you, they don't know what wink. Maybe we laugh a lot, but yeah. But as we just saw there from 1 Corinthians chapter 2, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, nor has it entered into the mind of any one of us in themselves all that God has prepared. So if we're going to see God in all things, if we're going to hear God in all things, if we're going to enter into the imagination, the understanding, the transcendent kind of vision of seeing and experiencing God in all things, it's probably like a lot of other things, only going to really take place in the Spirit. It's not going to take place first and foremost in the flesh. Certainly have impact on our flesh. No question about that. But so let us look at a few passages of Scripture. One which may strike you as a bit odd. We can talk about finding God in all things. But the Lord led me to look at just three aspects. Don't claim to be exhaustive in any way, but three ways of thinking about finding God in all things. And first we're going to start in 1 Corinthians, in chapter 1. No, chapter 3, sorry. The chapter after the one from which the verse came, talking about the wisdom of this world and the thing. So 1 Corinthians chapter 3. We're going to pick it up in verse 21. So that then let no man boast in men, including in oneself. Not just some feminist perspective for no one to boast in men. Let's not boast in our flesh. And certainly when we're thinking about or talking about finding God in all things. You know, Charlie over there, he's a very clever lad. He seems to see God in all things. Well, not by his own flesh, it doesn't. What's saying in fact. So let no one boast in men, for all things belong to you. Whether Paul or Apollos or Cephas, or the world, or life, or death, or things present, or things to come, God reminds us again, all things belong to you. If all things belong to you, and you belong to Christ, and Christ belongs to God, or is of God. And we are of Christ. And, it kind of gives us a perspective here, as Paul's saying, if all things belong to you, to me, and you belong to Christ, and Christ belongs to God, should it be impossible to see God in all